Former Finance Minister Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala once said, whenever you're fighting corruption, corruption will fight back. She added her voice to that. Is that what is happening now in the case of the suspension of the EFCC chairman? Let's take that and a number of other issues up with Evie Richards, Executive Director, Corruption Observatory. He joins us here in Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Is that what's happening?
Maybe I should first say that Nigeria currently is in the corruption trap. A nation is said to be in the corruption trap when it is denied foreign direct investments for development purposes, and then it is forced to undergo critical reforms that makes room for more corruption. And before you know it, you begin to have templates of legal corruption. This is a budding story. We are here to know the details. But that seat really, for the occupant of that seat to be suspended indefinitely, Nigerians are supposed to know the grievous offenses that, because the statement conveying that suspension was very brief, the allegations, so that you don't give room to speculations of retribution. It is official that before this president won elections, he was under investigation. And a number of times, Bawa did say so. Even the Senate president, current one, were all under investigation. So, in order not to make room for speculation, if you say he has committed grievous offenses, those offenses should be laid out. Nigerians want to know. So it would not be like we are walking into what we might describe as legal corruption.
Well, should we? Okay, because if you call it offenses, it sounds validated. As you said, there are allegations. Mm-hmm. Do you think those allegations should actually be put out? One of them that is famous is that is a former governor now, Matawali, saying that this happened, and a number of other people have also said that even before he became chairman of EFCC, there were some activities and all of those things. So it goes back to just sheer allegations, and those some would also say it's corruption is fighting back. Or maybe, as you said, the president was under investigation. Maybe he just wants to take his own pound of flesh.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So the allegations ought to be put in this outer space for everybody to know. For instance, when the case of Magu came, we knew several things, several A, B, C, D, E, that was in the outer space that he did, and you could see a panel was constituted, for another. So I'm saying that, look, normally around the world, a major top-down anti-corruption agency, which the EFCC is protected by the legislature, instruments from the legislature, and also some instruments from the executive for the common good of democracy. So that you don't just wake up one morning as the leadership of the executive and say, look, I no longer like your face, just go. Like what is happening now, But
Mr. Richard, if that could be the case, but if it's not the case, let's look at the trajectory of the exit from office of, our anti-corruption czars, which pretty much leaves a moral question on that office. Isn't it concerning, even though the former EFCC boss also says, look, he was being witch hunted and the allegations leveled against him are malicious. But it's one too many if we count down the line of, former EFCC bosses that have exited the office. Isn't it worrying?
I don't know. I really don't know how to react to this now, but look, somebody once said that the way the NNPC was governed, even if you put an angel there, the angel will become corrupted. Corruption is endemic in Nigeria. Everybody knows that. And the president is exposed to a lot of intelligence from, several quarters. So what he does know, you and I may not know at this moment. And to be very candid, it's not only the state that is corrupt. Even the people in Nigeria would love to be corrupt. That's a reality facing all of us.
Love to be corrupt.
And a lot of us are corrupt, is the simple truth. So, but the question is that...
Pardon me. Just explain that, because there are some watching you now saying, no, I'm not.
Okay. If you know that kind of person, just, what we call that now, you just give him a little trial. Put a queue somewhere to get to a place, and you need to spend about an hour on that queue. And then put another window where he could just pay a little money, and then he goes and get what he wants and see what he will do. What is corruption? This is the simple truth. So that is already in the blood of the average Nigerian. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that what Tinubu knows today on that seat, you and I may not know. So I would not say that, look, completely Bawa is undergoing witch hunt. I wouldn't say so. But what I would say is, what are these allegations? Nigerians want to know, such that we don't go into speculation. What has he done? Tell us what he has done, so we know why you are taking the action that you are. Or if you don't do that, it will simply mean that this is pure retribution.
But, Mr. Richard, when you consider that, for the immediate past, for the former boss of the commission, the recommendations of the panel that investigated him were not fully implemented. I doubt that they were even implemented in the first place. And when you consider that we really don't know what the outcome of this investigation will be for the current boss who has been suspended indefinitely, who regulates the regulator, so to speak? That's the commission. Can we trust the judiciary to regulate the regulator, or should we come up with another structure?
This is even my entry point into this conversation. Where you have a situation where corruption becomes legal, because there's legal corruption, what you do is go into constitutional reforms. So you may be looking more at the legislature to review the founding documentation of the commission, so that nobody wakes up and begin to say, look, we no longer like you, or you have done A, B, C, D, please go. It becomes difficult. One that is strengthened and properly done, you can't just have people come and say, look, you leave. For instance, you get up today, now can you say President Tinubu should leave? You would need 2/3, right, majority around the country. That's the kind of thing that we're looking at. So once you put a thing like that in place, even better people would love to become headship of that kind of commission. As it were today, we don't have that.
Well, Mr. Richard, perhaps in the same vein of that, question Bukola just asked, do you think we have enough institutional framework to fight corruption before getting in to the level of the EFCC? The basis is this, and how strong are they? For years, I talk about this all the time, my colleagues already call me names for it. The Auditor General's report is said to be an instrument of fighting corruption, or at least monitoring outflows of the federal government. As you mentioned the legislature, how efficient has the legislature been in that regard? Because there is supposed to be either a House committee, or a Senate committee or something, monitoring the activities of certain MDAs, including the EFCC. So do you think we have strong enough institutional frameworks all across the nation, perhaps at the federal level and even at the states level, to ensure that things don't even get bad enough before they get to the EFCC?
Yes, we have a number of them, and I'm very happy that you mentioned this Auditor General's report, the one that was released in 2022, right? That spoke. I was doing some work recently, and I stumbled into that report. What happens is those constitutional provisions that will regulate issues like this are crushed by impunity. I saw the impunity with which the Federal Ministry of Finance treated the pre-shipment inspection of the only revenue earner that we have as a nation, crude oil and gas. From 2016 up until 2020, according to that report, all this reform, all these provisions to regulate this were jettisoned by the Buhari administration. Not me saying so, that's what the general report. In fact, about 8 breaches that the legislature ought to have risen, what's the name of the past Senate president now and the speaker, ought to have risen to the occasion to say, look, no, this cannot happen. But that never happened. Nobody said anything. And I'm not even sure that Nigerians are aware of this report, because in some climes, that's enough to set a nation ablaze. So, but that impunity, that culture of impunity, is what crushes this provision that should regulate.
Whether or not that is effective, I guess time will tell. Let's go to Abuja. My colleagues have a question for you.
Yeah, Mr. Richards, good morning. So, I mean, when my colleagues also referenced that accusation or allegation by the former Zamfara state governor saying the EFCC boss, the now suspended one, demanded some $2 million bribe from him. Many were concerned, even though the EFCC responded at the time saying, well, if they had anything, they should prove it. Then you also look back and you see how the former Attorney General Malami and the former AFCC boss Mago at that time went back and forth about proceeds of crime management and his intervention, how there were reports of him influencing decisions or proceeds or some vessels. So all of those things raised a lot of concern. And then there was this U.S. report at the time which also did say corruption under the former government was pervasive, it was endemic, and you thought, in spite of all that has been done, so these challenges exist despite all the efforts or whatever people might have read or whatever the previous government or government at the time said they've done. Now, still following up on that question about what should we do? How should we approach this to ensure that, one, if you have an Attorney General or Minister of Justice, if they separate the offices, or whoever is there does not interfere, or that agency runs and then everyone can see that indeed we do have a framework, an institution, either for the EFCC, the ICPC, they can do their jobs no matter whose ox is God.
This revolves around the removal from office of the chairman either of the ICPC or of the EFCC. The instruments that makes it possible, the processes to be followed for that person to be removed from office. And that will require constitutional review, some reform of the founding documentation of the commission, whether it is the ICPC or the EFCC. And that should bring together the 3 major parties in the government, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. Once that is done, and it is very clear that nobody can bring to bear retribution or trying to, exactly that's what it is, in removing the occupant of that desk, then we will be sure that we're going on a better trajectory than we are right now. As it is right now, any president that comes that doesn't like the previous headship of the leader of the EFCC will find one excuse or the other to say, look, my friend, you can go. So it will require some kind of deliberate reform in the founding documentation of the commission, ICPC or EFCC, such that it becomes almost impossible for one single party to wake up and say, look, we no longer like your face, take a bow and leave.
You know, you've kept tabs on what we've done over years in terms of the measures and the policies that different governments have put in place to ensure that, yes, we're on track with respect to fighting or tackling corruption and its tendencies in different parts of government. So from what you've seen over the years, how would you rate it? Are we making progress? Are we taking the right steps or what?
No, we are not making progress. Not too long ago, I saw some of the interviews that came from Mr. Bawa, where he was proud to say a lot of convictions have been made within the polity, you know, and been one of the best years. I think it was 2021. They did a lot of convictions and all of that. And I made a comment, you know, in this studio that, look, the fact that you are convicting a lot of people does not mean that corruption is on the decline, because you can convict 20 and, you know, progressively you have much more corruption in the contest than you had before that. So, but there are ways that it is done around the world. There are world best practices that we should follow. And regrettably, really, Mr. Bawa was trying to copy this from the committee of which I was one. You know, we went to visit him concerning international standards. You know, putting standards into systems and making those systems almost impregnable to corruption. That is the way corruption is fought around the world. So that while you are working as an employee, you are fighting corruption. And these standards are commonplace. One of it is the quality management system, you know, ISO 9001. Another one is the anti-bribery management system, ISO 37001. Compliance, ISO 37301. If any organization put in place only these three standards, even if the leadership wants to steal, it becomes almost impossible for them to steal. However, even if you use impunity to steal, it's glaring for everyone to see that you actually stole. You know, so we are not making progress because the right things are not being done currently. Is what we're doing right now is like, you know, putting manual efforts where we can actually automate the system.
The systems. Well, I think another area where, you know, we hope that whoever takes over the helm of affairs will also look into is this proliferation of advance fee fraud. I mean, we see a lot of young people now in different states. It's now a major problem in quite a number of states, from Edo, Delta, Nasarawa. You just name wherever it is you have young people concentrated, you might find a proliferation of that. But let me take you up on the investigation that is now being done by the DSS. Considering the rivalry between the DSS, which we witnessed, well, let me land on that, between the DSS and the EFCC, which we also witnessed at the start of the Tinubu administration. Investigating Mr. Bawa, do you think it is the DSS that should head that?
The DSS does have a role to play, but it would have been better to have an independent commission, an independent panel with experts drawn from various sectors of the country to investigate Bawa, and not solely left in the hands of the DSS, seemingly because of the major reason that you just mentioned, the rivalry between the DSS and the EFCC. You know, so it should not be left, and it would be very easy for the executive to manipulate the DSS than to manipulate an elaborate commission of inquiry into, and these are the things I'm referring to when I say that, look, the founding documentation of the EFCC should be reviewed. Once it is reviewed and the process of removing the leader becomes almost impossible, it will no longer be attractive for every president to say, look, I don't like you anymore, go. Because you have to explain to Nigerians why you are removing him. Even as it were now, we do not yet know the seemingly heavy allegations, that in any way they are allegations.
Okay, well,
so the loophole is there, and it's too.
Our time is up, Mr. Richards, but just this one thing. Now, EFCC is just one of the anti-corruption agencies in the country. Do you see a situation where, you said the other time that we're not making progress the way we should be making progress. Do you see a need for some kind of a nexus of these anti-corruption agencies so that whatever affects one will affect others, and then they can fight this corruption thing seamlessly and as a team, not just as agencies in silos?
Anti-corruption agencies are set up with major areas of focus. And that is why you see that the area of focus of the EFCC is not entirely that of focus of the ICPC. Ditto for procurement regulators like the BPP and all of that. But what can actually make room for that kind of unison amongst them would actually also come from the legislature. So the question now will be, if they are not interested in doing that, who will do it?
Well again, let's hang that question. We really have to go now, because our time is up.
Before the 9th Senate, seeking to subject the removal of the chairman of the commission to its own confirmation. So perhaps that is progress, and perhaps that will be represented before the 10th Assembly.
Well, it's a question that we have to take to another time. Evie Richards is Executive Director, Corruption Observatory. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.